I'm going to start singing thanks for the memories, because we always used to talk to you about the dollar, too. We always try to get you to, I don't know, to not just come out with the standard, we are in support of a strong dollar, because there were certain things we thought at times maybe a weaker dollar would have been something that would be advantageous. And I don't think ever more than maybe today. And we asked Scott Bessent last week about it, and he reiterated the strong dollar policy. But wouldn't it solve a lot of, if you let it slowly weaken, would it solve a lot of the problems that President Trump is trying to address with trade imbalances and future debt repayment and everything else? Do you think we still have is that cast in stone strong dollar forever?
I actually believe the important policy is a stable dollar as opposed to a strong dollar. And when I tried to indicate that as Treasury Secretary, the markets reacted. But I think that if you just look at the dollar, and the markets are what determine the exchange rates. And I look at the U.S., I think the U.S. is going to outperform Europe and the rest of the world. I think the dollar is the only safe haven to store assets around the world. And I really don't see any challenge to the dollar, at least in the next 10 or 20 years, as the reserve currency. Now, there could be things that change, but I think when you look at all those different things, you know, you're going to either have a stable dollar or a stronger dollar. And obviously, interest rate differentials have a very big impact on what happens to the dollar, because you can arbitrage various currencies based upon the difference in interest rates. But no, I don't think a weak dollar is in our interest, but I do think a stable dollar and not an overvalued dollar is in our interest.
Secretary, one final question for you, just because I think the American public, or at least some folks who are critical of this administration, are wondering about it. You know, when you went into the administration, you effectively gave up virtually, I think, most of your, not assets, but, you know, you're selling stock and moving things into blind trust and doing all sorts of things. Obviously, Scott Bessent and some others are doing that, but there are lots of other people in this administration, or at least people who are involved in very big decision-making, that still own all sorts of stocks and other assets that could be impacted by the work that they are doing. How do you feel about that?
Well, let me just say, it was a great honor to serve the president and serve as Treasury Secretary. And the last thing I was concerned about was having to divest assets. I didn't use blind trust, just to be clear. I sold all my assets and put them in basically market indexes. I think there is this concept of a special government employee that certain people are in today. I think it's meant for a relatively short period of time, and my understanding is they're still bound by the ethic rules. But if those people end up in the government longer term, I do think they should have to abide by the same issues. But I think it's helpful in terms of getting people into the government shorter term.